I have this voicemail caller, goes by Guy Young, I believe. Says it before every voicemail. Hey, Owen, Guy Young, Brookfield, Illinois, I think is what he said. Anyway, he left a string of voicemails. Because you know, I only listen to him if they're under 60 seconds. So he left like 30 voicemails that are 15 seconds each. Anyway, Guy, next time, if you want to make it under 60 seconds, you can kind of condense it into one thing. And normally I wouldn't play stuff this long because it's not really like, it's not a good format for my style, but it seems like you put a lot of work into it, so we'll play it. You wouldn't believe how long it took me to piece all these together, and unfortunately I got his iconic intro cut out somehow. Hey, Owen, Guy Young, Brookfield, Illinois.
Trump was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and never had to work a day in his life. Hitler was born low, middle class, and struggle. I believe both of them. I know Trump had a tough father. I believe Hitler had a tough father, too.
For the record, I personally think that Hitler was insane and immoral, actively setting out to hurt the people around him for the sake of hurting them, like diverting money from the war effort into the death camps to take out as many Jews as he possibly could before he went out when he realized he was losing. For example, that's just one example. He genuinely wanted to kill people. I don't think Trump does. I think he would be willing to if the circumstances meant he got a little more money or power or fame or whatever. But I think his motivation is solely to benefit himself, not necessarily to hurt others. However, Trump has absolutely eroded our democracy to a degree that, you know, the Nazi Party eroded democracy in the 1920s in Germany. Of course, Hitler destroyed democracy in 1933, but before that, Germany fell into dictatorship, and the fall looked very much like what's happening to the U.S. right now. So anyway, I don't think he's like Hitler, but he's operating in an environment that produced Hitler at the very least. And he's producing this environment. He's creating it.
Other two. Trump has basically proven that his only skill is grifting and performing as a rich man. He has lost billions in failed businesses, thriving through tax dodging, failing to pay contractors, declaring bankruptcy numerous times, while always finding a new grift. Hitler struggled as a youth, but later on in his life, he demonstrated a decent skill as an artist, but was unable to survive on that skill. He did any number of things to survive. Trump was a cowardly draft dodger. Hitler was a decorated World War I hero.
All true. Yeah, absolutely. Hitler was selling paintings on like postcards and stuff to survive, and he was rejected from like art schools multiple times because the people that he drew were like lifeless. They didn't seem to have any emotion in their face or anything. He was really into architecture though, and when he was trying to create a new Germany, he tried to create a new everything, like a German form of chemistry, really. A German version of mathematics, a German form of architecture and everything. And he even went as far as to like tear down houses to replace them with German architecture. Dead serious. Anyway, he was a big fan of like arts and architecture, but only his kind of art and architecture.
Hero who was gassed but survived. He had actually been a selected corporal by vote of his platoon, and he did all the hardest tasks for his comrades, showing a concern for others that Hitler has never demonstrated. Trump was living the...
Yeah, he was a courier. He was carrying messages, and he was gassed. 100%, you're right.
Trump was living the life of a debaucher, doing things like funding beauty pageants so he could ogle scantily clad young women in dressing rooms, even sexually assaulting E. Jean Carroll, and hanging out with noted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Hitler, disillusioned after the war, as were many German soldiers, joined the Nazi Party.
Yeah, disillusioned after World War I. Yeah, 100%. They were unhappy with it. And the word for, like, people is Volk in German. I think it's pronounced like folk, F-O-L-K, but it's spelled V-O-L-K. But it's not just like German people. There's like a mystical undertone to it, the word. And it only applies to like pure-blooded German people. That has existed for like ever. It's weird. They have a divine, unique right to rule. That's kind of like the perspective that Germany had at the time. That's why nationalism was so rampant. They believed that they were special and unique and had a unique right to everything. Anyway, yeah. The word Volk was commonly paired with the word Volkisch, which means I compare them to the words race and racist, but they're not really exactly like that. It means ethno-nationalist, kind of extreme personality, where you believe that pure-blooded Germans, Aryans, are the ones that deserve to own everything in the whole 9 yards. That atmosphere existed, as Guy Young is saying, after the war in droves. It was all over the place after World War One. And that environment of, to try to put it into context, that environment of like having that environment of believing that you have a divine right to rule, much like evangelicals today, is what produced the Nazi movement. A lot of the things that we see in Germany in that time period are really familiar. We see it today. I keep thinking to myself, like, what's a good analogy or a good comparison to the word folk? But I don't even need to get a comparison because we see that from evangelicals. Yeah, I totally get that. This mystical belief that you deserve to rule everything, 100%. I see that all the time. So many things from that time period connect to this one. It's wild. You guys should check out my podcast. I like kind of compile all of these videos into a final form, which is like an audio version or whatever. And it has fewer ads and everything. So yeah, check that out. Link in the description of that. It's on Spreaker. Also, everywhere podcasts are found. I believe it's Owen Morgan Podcast.
After the war, as were many German soldiers, joined the Nazi party, and upon reaching a certain standing in that party, attempted a power grab to bear hall push.
That's true. 1923, I think he staged a coup, much like January 6th, except this coup was successful until it wasn't. I think he managed to capture some congressmen, and I think one of them died. I don't remember. He got appointed to some positions, but the military came in from outside and shut it down, put him in prison, sentenced him to 5 years for high treason. He only served 9 months for good behavior. There was some weird thing in Germany at the time where if you were doing something for patriotic reasons, you get a lighter sentence. It's basically like a resort that you go to instead of prison. You're separated from society, but you have all kinds of modern amenities, and you can write and talk to people and wander around stuff. That's what Hitler was sent to, because he did it for patriotic reasons. Back to that Volk thing, that obsession with having, with that national identity, the exceptionalism that was part of it.
The push failed and led him in jail, where he wrote his manifesto, Mein Kampf, a book Trump owns a copy of. Maybe the only book Trump has attempted to read, let alone...
I think that he owned a copy of Hitler's speeches, Trump did, as claimed by Ivana Trump, his ex-wife. The most surprising part of that would be that Trump reads. I can't imagine that. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he owned a copy of his speeches at all.
Trump owns a copy of. Maybe the only book Trump has attempted to read, let alone write. He, of course, agreed to a ghostwriter sifting through his rambling thoughts and managing to make art of a deal. At some point, Trump realized he would never become the richest man, and in his mind, and powerful. He came up with his masterpiece. Seeing how poorly educated he loves them, poured money into coffers of megachurch prosperity preachers, and realizing GOP voters are stupid, he decided to run as a Republican to try to become the most powerful man on earth, the President of the United States. Calculated he could grift billions of dollars, both he and his family. He might not have what Musk and Bezos had, but they weren't POTUS. Hitler saw the despair of post-war and Great Depression Germany and offered them renewed hope to make Germany the greatest power on earth. He blamed the Jews for Germany's struggles. Trump blames immigrants.
Yeah, the Jews were the immigrants of the time and place, 100%. Jews, in their mind, were not folk in the same way because they weren't born there. They weren't from the tribes that produced Aryans or whatever. It's all the same. It's all exactly the same. However, Jewish Germans did view themselves as folk. They believed that they were equally as special as being part of Germany. And a lot of Jewish Germans were ultra-nationalists, obsessed with the idea that Germany was exceptional and deserved everything. And there were even a disproportionate number of Jews on the front lines fighting in World War I, surprisingly. Nazis tried to prove that Jews knew what was happening in World War I, knew they were going to lose, and were just sending Germans to their death for depopulation efforts or some other ridiculous thing. So they did this study to see like how many Jews were out there on the front lines, and wouldn't you know it, it was proportionately more Jews than non-Jews. Isn't that funny? Like proportional to their population or whatever. They quietly buried that report till it was unearthed by historians later.
After gaining power, he tested the will of a war-weary Europe to oppose him. He even ramped up the persecution. That's when he ramped up the persecutions of undesirables, gays, gypsies, mentally handicapped, and of course the hated Jews, by starting the ghetto, pogroms, and concentration camps.
I think the word, I feel it's important to just say it. I think the word gypsy is actually derogatory now. I think it's Roma is the word, because that word has been used in a lot of really offensive ways in the past, like saying I've been gypped, for example, or claiming that they're living like gypsies, or it's like they don't have a home to live in because they're poor and they just beg people for money. It's a stereotype that's really ugly, that's existed for like years, and nobody's said anything about it because it just didn't connect. But yeah, they're Roma. That's the ethnicity or whatever. Roma people. I wouldn't normally use the word, but I think it's important to clarify in these cases. So it wasn't offensive, 15 years ago to most of society. I didn't realize that it was an ethnicity, honestly. So it totally makes sense that, people would be using that word casually, because I used it casually. But yeah, there are people out there that, feel hurt or affected by it. So I figured I should mention.
Camps. Not yet the Holocaust. You started the Holocaust really when he started the invasion of Poland at the beginning of World War II. Up until this point, he still was not, the world had still not realized what a monster he was. Trump, if he gains power, would do similar, not the casting of Jews and everything, but the deportation, going just a step less. But
yeah, 100% agree. And that's how it started with Hitler, actually. Again, Hitler was a megalomaniacal nutcase who was desperate to kill as many people as he possibly could, and holds the reins of control to his dying breath. That's immoral. I think Trump is just amoral, just lacking morality, willing to do whatever it takes to further his own goals. So there is that difference. But his own goals do involve rounding up immigrants, just like they did in Germany at the time, and putting them into camps, concentrating the population into camps, concentration camps, different from death camp. I don't see the death camp thing happening in the United States, but concentration camp, absolutely. Yes, 100%. And hell, I wouldn't put anything past Trump. Maybe the death camp thing would be a possibility. Probably not, but maybe.
A step less. But I actually believe that Trump would gas Jews if that was approved by the country and that he could get away with it.
I agree.
Trump has managed to harness the racism, xenophobia, intolerance, and general stupidity of the worst generation in American history, mine, the boomers. Handed everything in a platter by so-called, don't forget these are the people who groomed us to hate and fear those different than us. The ones who defeated the Nazis, Imperial Japan, and Fascist Italy. Boomers and greatest conveniently forget Communist Soviet Union was on the way to crush Germany with our Lend-Lease equipment playing just as big a role as our GIs and Air Force. Trump used a delusional conviction, we are infallible, to agree to throw away our democracy, something Germany tried for the first time after humbling defeat in World War I. After a humbling defeat in World War I in the middle of economic chaos, Hitler seized control of Germany. Meanwhile, we have the strongest economy and the longest-lived democratic republic in history, and yet he and the GOP have convinced 45% of the country that this system is failing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. In the 1920s, like 1923 or something, I wrote about this in my book, The Church in Chains. What did I name it? I changed the name recently, so I don't remember. How Hitler exploited faith to gain control. It hasn't released yet, but I wrote about this in my book. Hyperinflation was absolutely obscene at the time. This is like my draft, one of my drafts from my book here. I made a chart to show hyperinflation in Germany. So 1913, before World War I, a German mark was worth 4 per dollar, basically, 4 German marks per dollar. 1918, December 1918, 8 marks per dollar. It's like half of what it was, right? So people making like $30,000 a year, for example, now make $15,000 a year because of that level of inflation, basically. April 1919, 12. It increased by 50% again. 1921, 263 per US dollar. It took 263 German marks to buy one US dollar. That is nuts. Then 493 in July 1922. August, 1,000. October, 3,000. December, 7,000. January 1923, 17,000 German marks to buy a dollar. April 1923, 24,000 German marks. July, 353,000. August 1923, 4.6 million German marks to buy one US dollar. September 1923, 98.8 million. I'm going through the chart for the audio audience. October 1923, a month later, 25.2 billion German marks to get $1. November 1923, 2.1 trillion German marks per US dollar. And then December 1923, 4.2 trillion. It got so intense that they had to invent new words in certain languages to describe how big these numbers were. And they had like economists coming out and talking about these big numbers and like mathematicians explaining like a trillion is equal to 1,000 million or a billion. A billion is worth 1,000 million. So we can just refer to like a million as an blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they had people coming out and talking about that at the time. They dug themselves out of that by like 1924, I think, by creating a brand new currency that was on the gold standard, is linked to the cost of gold. So it went up and down based on gold prices, but it was bad. There's a story of a girl that was selling herself for a stick of butter. There's a real story that really happened. We have her diary. Anyway, that was after World War I. That was after they had to pay war reparations, and then you get speculators coming in and betting on the currency to fail, shorting the German currency. And they were right, it failed. You got super rich off of it. Eventually, it was pulled out of that hole by the Weimar Republic, the democratic government that existed at the time, and they fixed the economy. It was really, really good by the time Hitler took control, and then Hitler plunged it back into complete chaos by starting the war effort. He's basically putting them right back into this absolutely insane state of hyperinflation just to build tanks and stuff. It was impressive how they avoided the rules of the Treaty of Versailles. They were only technically allowed to own, or they were only technically allowed to have like 100,000 soldiers at any given moment. And Hitler got around that by getting his people to create new organizations made up of kind of paramilitary members called the SA, brown shirts, and the SS, which is like his private security. And they built it out into a fully fledged organization. Airplanes were being purchased at like a ridiculous rate in Germany at the time. And it was pretty clear to everybody that, you know, something's going, like they're building a ton of airplanes. So they were marking them down on documents as airplanes for training, to train people to fly them. 58% of the airplanes that were purchased by Germany leading up to World War II were marked down as trainer planes. Anyway, sorry, got off on a tangent there. Let's keep listening to Guy Young here.
Trump is thought better than Hitler because he isn't directly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. Hitler brought this on by convincing a downtrodden nation he alone could fulfill their dreams. This is something a con man like Trump could never have done.
It's called populism, and yeah, appealing to common man, claiming that the rich are responsible for all your problems. In Hitler's case, the Jewish elites were responsible, who sent them to war and made them fail and everything else. And, weaponized all of that into hate against immigrants and vice versa.
Strong-willed and at times courageous. When his country realized he had brought ruin and death, they tried to kill him. This failed. The Allies never tried to kill him because he was a terrible military commander. At this point in Trump's career, he has not done the damage that Hitler did to his country and the world. This is solely because we are so strong. However, the Heritage Foundation and GOP have been chipping away at our weakest points, like the Electoral College and SCOTUS.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know what's fascinating? Hitler used to lie about crowd sizes all the time. It was like his big thing. but he never questioned election results, fascinatingly, to my knowledge. I have seen no evidence of that, and I've been like neck deep in this subject for like months now trying to research for my book. That's interesting, right? Hitler never questioned Hitler never questioned the legitimacy of elections. I would have thought that'd be the first thing he did.
And, the Heritage Foundation has also undermined local government in swing states and judicial personnel ever since Reagan. We are now at our weakest, and they are at their strongest. Yet we still have time and the will to save the country and the world. Trump's first term caught the Republicans not fully prepared, so they had to show their hand and have revealed their true plan, Project 2025.
Agreed.
Now they've crawled out from the dark. We know what they planned for this country. If re-elected, Trump and the GOP could surpass Hitler. It will take longer because we are so strong that the likelihood of a nuclear war is limited by assured mutual destruction. But what if other sociopathic leaders like Putin, Un, Xi, or Iran decide if we can't have it all, no one will have anything?
That's why denuclearization is so important, and why, in my opinion, nuclear weapons just should not exist anywhere by anybody, period. That it should be like a legal mandate worldwide. No nuclear weapons. That's just me. And you know what? If it were me, I would actually take the step of completely denuclearizing the United States. Completely. Get rid of all of them. But I'd have, like, the European countries to back us up in case somebody did something stupid, like try to nuke the United States. You know, there would still be nukes over there, pointed at everybody.
Even combined and packing together, we cannot be beaten by them. But what is left of the planet will no longer sustain human life. They might not care, but we do. Barring this quick death, the energy policy that will be implemented would leave a scorched, uninhabitable landscape within the next 100 to 200 years, maybe sooner. In the meantime, the collapse of government oversight or intentional sabotage of law, education, organization would leave us in chaos. Instead of being the Earth's best hope, we would have become her executioner. If we vote blue, the nightmare is slowed and eventually stopped, then reversed. Vote blue. Hey, Owen, Guy Young, Brookfield, Illinois.
Oh, hey, I guess I included it at the end. Yeah, agreed. I agree. Vote blue. 100%. We need to fix this problem that we found ourselves in. It's a mess. We need to do something. And, you know, so a lot of this stuff is like kind of, people feel down about it. I don't want you to feel down about this. Like, this may not even help. This might make you feel even more down, but let me put it this way. The universe ends when I die, for me. I'm just like, it's gone. That's it. So I shouldn't really care what happens after a certain point in time, because I'm not going to be here to see it. Who cares? Whatever. But I do care about the people around me and about the human race generally, about making sure it survives and builds and grows. So while I'm here, before the universe ends for me, I'm going to try to make sure that fewer people have their universe end, and that more of them enjoy the time that they have here, basically, as long as they have it. It's just like part of my moral code, I guess you could say. Just reduce suffering as much as possible. Thank you, Guy. I appreciate that set of voicemails. Yeah, just leave voicemails under 1 minute next time instead of 15 seconds.